Welcome to this live session. We're going to be jumping into lesson 2. First, I wanted to pull this up from Super Awesome Data. Thanks for joining. It's always cool to have you on. And I love your comment here, which is you played a random scale. You picked out the D major scale, and from just the colors, you were able to play it last night. That's awesome. It actually makes me think of I don't know who this guy is, but on social media, he does he runs a lot of ads. I don't follow his stuff, but he shows up in my feed sometimes because of ads he runs. And one of them was, when people do the role play and it's themselves talking to themselves, but it's supposed to be a conversation between two people. One of the things he was saying in the conversation was, hey, I want to learn this song. And so he swoops in as the other person with the solution to his problems, which was, hey, I have this book that you can, play these chords. And then it goes back to the other guy and he's like, so what do I have to learn? And then the other guy's like, you don't have to learn anything. And it's like, that was the selling point, is you don't have to learn anything. For me, that is not what I'm going for. I want to embrace my humanity. I want to understand the why behind the what and the how. So to be able to just pick out a scale and know that it's a D major scale and understand and start to see the relationships between those notes is so empowering, because chords are going to be built upon those notes of the scale. Progressions are built from those chords. Songs arise from those progressions. And so ignorance is not bliss, knowledge is power. And I love it. I love that you're playing around with those patterns. Scammers. Yeah. Well, I mean, he definitely has something to sell, but it's not something I'm looking for personally. Hey, Keenan Music, it's cool to have you on, and we're going to be geeking out as we do here. So lesson 2 is where we're picking up. We left off wrapping up lesson 1 of the course. And as always, to get our bearings, I'm just going to pull this up. The easiest way to find content is within the library, because there are playlists that help you navigate all of the posts within Locals. So as a supporter on Locals, you have access to all the content, and mycolormusic.com lists all of those posts into organized playlists. And we are in the music theory course playlist. So we went through lesson 0 and lesson 1 so far. Now we're going to jump into lesson 2, notes and intervals. So we've learned how to see sound, correlating the color wheel with the circle of fifths, and then rearranging the circle of fifths into the chromatic scale, which is the mother of all note patterns, the pattern that we use to actually play music in a practical way. Now we're going to start to really dive into notes and intervals. And as you'll see, this is part of part 1, fundamentals. Fundamentals can seem like a boring word because it's so fundamental. But it really is the foundation upon which all of the beautiful symmetries and geometries and patterns of music arise. So we're not going to build our house upon sand, as it were. We're going to build it upon a solid foundation and of rock. And that gets into the notes and intervals. So let's jump in. I'm going to pull up lesson 2 here. And as we've been doing, I'm going to read segments, and I'm going to be checking in with any chat, and we'll talk along the way. So let's get into lesson 2, notes and intervals. Notes and intervals. And this might look like some cryptic sequence of symbols when really there's a beautiful logic to it all. So let's get into where you are. Now that you can see sound, a world of possibility has opened. You're no longer groping in the dark, as they say, which means you can actually look at note patterns as they appear on the guitar. So in this lesson, that's exactly what we'll do. And in the process, you'll learn the terms that musicians use to describe these patterns, basic labels for all the notes and intervals that are fundamental to music theory. So we are in lesson 2, notes and intervals, right in the middle of part 1, fundamentals. What you will learn in this lesson. Here's a quick preview of what we'll cover in lesson 2. You'll look in more detail at the holy trinity of music patterns, the chromatic scale, the major scale, and the circle of fifths. Using these 3 patterns, you will learn how to navigate the guitar in all 12 keys. Using colors and shapes, you'll learn how to label all the intervals using numbers called scale degrees. And finally, you'll see how colors streamline your understanding of notes and intervals using one simple set of symbols. And you can see here that there are some faded symbols there, letters around the perimeter and numbers on the inside with the geometric star there. And the emphasis is on the colors and shapes, because ultimately you'll see that the colors and shapes kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They illustrate what the letters are trying to represent, but even better than the letters, and also communicate what the numbers are trying to convey, but even better than the numbers, and in one simple streamlined system. So as we go, everything I just said will make more sense. So the fractal nature of sound. In lesson 1, you learned that music isn't as complicated as it seems, right? Now that you can actually see sound, that is, which is the very definition of music theory, so you can literally look at music to understand its design and the way it truly functions. And in the process of visualizing sound, you found that all music is built upon 3 patterns, which include the chromatic scale, the major scale, and the circle of fifths. Just 3 simple patterns that lead like doors towards sonic bliss, where each one brings you closer to a better glimpse of music itself. In a word, that is, it's wonderful because the simplicity of it all means that you can easily master the science of music to then perfect the art of songwriting too, as you will see ahead. But as you found in lesson 1, these patterns also have a surprising twist, in that each one is just a variation of the others, so that all 3 patterns are simply permutations of the same 12 notes. To illustrate, the next image shows you what I mean. In essence, the chromatic scale is what forms the major scale, which then forms the circle of fifths, which in turn is what forms the chromatic scale once again. So from left to right here, the chromatic scale leads to the major scales, which form the circle of fifths, which can be arranged into the chromatic scale. So it just keeps on rearranging the same 12 notes. But you can notice here, and the colors and the shapes highlight this fact, is that all of these different rearrangements of the notes essentially are just, we're using the same 12 notes. We're reducing, reusing, and recycling when it comes to music with just the same 12 notes. It's seamless It's a seamless and cyclical metamorphosis, right? And in reverse, the same is true as well, where moving from left to right, the chromatic scale turns into the circle of fifths, which then morphs into the major scale, which then leads back into the chromatic scale once more. So from right to left, we start with the chromatic scale, and what we saw in lesson 1 is we can rearrange those 12 notes by taking every other note and rotating that set of whole step intervals on 180 degrees to get us the circle of fifths. You can't make this up. This is a natural pattern that occurs in music. From the circle of fifths, you can see that we can take this subset of notes that are adjacent to each other. When we rotate that grouping of that subset of notes, we get the major scale. And once we have the major scale, we can just fill in all of the other notes and we're at the chromatic scale. This is a sidebar that I think is worth making. I think this came up last week. Oh man, I should have had it pulled up. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Oh, there it is. Yay. All right, so check this out. Speaking of MC Escher, we were talking about MC Escher, and I said that I have actually a print of this that my brother, it was really cool. He Mod Podged a print from a book, a larger print of this art piece called Metamorphosis, onto like a long board. And so it's like this on the wall. It looks really cool. And this is only a segment of it. It goes on and on. It starts out with checkerboard and just goes through this whole metamorphosis of images that naturally morph into subsequent phases of the pattern until it finally just comes back to its initial state. And this definitely was, knowing this artwork was helpful in recognizing the patterns of music, because having already been introduced to, oh, wow, that can happen. Like you can have patterns that morph into each other and metamorphize as it goes, was helpful in recognizing, oh, that's what's going on in music too. MC Escher was a big music fan. He was a big fan of Bach, played the cello a bit himself, listened to Bach a lot as he was creating this art, which only makes sense because it's all related, right? So kind of interesting. I'm going to pause there and jump into some of the comments. So Super Awesome Daddy, you said, something that worked for me this week. I had extra stickers from the piano sticker set. Yes. So I made some flashcards. I realized I could have colored them myself, right? And I quizzed myself and organized. That's awesome. I love that. To absorb these patterns. And the beautiful thing is that it's all patterns, right? So pattern recognition. Ultimately, that's what music theory comes down to, is pattern recognition. And normally we recognize these patterns with our ears only, but our eyes and our mind, so much, a huge percentage of our brain is actually allocated to, what is it, the occipital lobe and visual interpretation. And since it's pattern recognition, to see the patterns is very helpful. So that's awesome. I found the black keys still go by the color wheel, and boom, everything clicked. Yes. And then I did the D major scale based on the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. But then I saw it as shapes with the colors. Yes, I love it. I could see how the shapes alternating with whole and half steps or squares and circles, and how they changed based on the whole and half. So good. I love it. Love it. That is really, really cool. Yeah, so I moved around them, around like the piano keys, and voila, I put the black key flashcards over the white key flashcards in a circle. That's really cool. Yeah, speaking of that, let's just, while we're on the topic, so if you notice that the major scale, for example, is the white keys, if we're focusing on the key of C, and the black keys are actually the pentatonic scale of the tritone. So if you take C, the red square, and G flat, the green square, these are tritones, and we'll get more into tritones as we get into the notes and intervals. But notice how the major scale skips all of these notes, and it happens to be the pentatonic scale of its tritone. Or if you have the minor scale, still white keys, starting on A, and you start on the black key of its tritone. So instead of an orange-yellow circle, you have a blue-purple circle, and you play that. It's a minor pentatonic scale. So the major scale and the pentatonic scale are intricately connected. All of these patterns play nicely together because they're all part of the same superstructure of notes and intervals. So speaking of notes and intervals, let's check out the next here. So basically those three patterns, the circle of fifths, the major scale, and the circle of fifths, and the chromatic scale, are all very related. So in other words, each pattern is simply a rearrangement of the next, which is why the major scale sounds so good. Because the major scale, like the chromatic scale itself, is really just a circle of fifths sequence that has been transformed, you see? Or better said, you might think of the major scale as a hybrid of both the chromatic scale and the circle of fifths, since it displays elements of each, like a mutual homage through which one pattern pays tribute to the other, and vice versa, you could say, where the major scale stands as a kind of self-reference to each pattern's own reincarnation. So the chromatic scale in this inner ring is all 12 notes, and the chromatic scale is just a rearrangement of the circle of fifths, which is in this outer ring, and the major scale is sandwiched in between. It's kind of the missing link, as it were. It's a bit of both. It's an homage to the chromatic scale in that it arises from that pattern, and it's an homage to the circle of fifths in that the circle of fifths arises from the major scale. But so the major scale is kind of in between. It's this missing link, as I say. So in short, it's beautiful, elegant, and badass. Like a fractal universe that folds back on itself, these three patterns form one unified whole. or what you might call the holy trinity of music. And now that you know how they're connected, you can proceed with ease.